I used to believe that everything I fazia for my family fazia parte da vida, uma obrigação silenciosa, quase automática, como respirar. Sou Maria, tenho 57 anos, e por quase 30 deles vivi para minha filha, Ana. Cada escolha, cada caminho desviado, aconteceu por ela. Meu próprio corpo parece agora saber disso. Joelhos que rangem, costas curvadas, mãos marcadas pelo trabalho pesado e sem elogio. Mas sempre achei normal. Afinal, mãe é pra isso, não? Havia noites em que eu passava acordada revisando contas na cabeça, tentando entender qual delas poderia atrasar sem cortar algo essencial. Muitas vezes abri mão de comida para garantir que Ana levasse lanche para a escola. Outras, decidi que uma roupa antiga remendada era suficiente. Ana precisava de uniforme novo, e isso vinha antes de qualquer vontade minha. Quando ela tinha 8 anos, recusei uma promoção no mercado em que trabalhava porque o novo horário me impediria de buscá-la na saída da escola. Daquele dia, lembro da gerente Dona Ivone falando: "Você ainda vai sentir falta dessas oportunidades, Maria." Eu só sorri, guardando o aviso numa caixinha silenciosa dentro de mim. O segundo sacrifício que trago na pele foi nunca ter terminado meus estudos. Saí da escola com 17 para cuidar da minha mãe, doente do coração, e nunca voltei. Sempre que passava em frente ao colégio, mesmo já depois de casada, me bate uma saudade antiga, uma sensação de que deixei uma porta aberta e nunca voltei para fechá-la. Terceiro, abri mão de ter alguém comigo. Depois de separar do pai da Ana, que sumiu da nossa vida quando ela tinha 6 anos, nunca mais deixei ninguém chegar perto. Dizia a mim mesma que homem dava trabalho e confusão, mas no fundo era medo de trazer dor de novo para dentro de casa. Com o tempo, fui normalizando o sacrifício. Acordava cedo, enfrentava 2 ônibus para chegar no serviço como diarista, voltava tarde e ajeitava tudo em casa para Ana ter o mínimo de paz. Se chorava de cansaço, fazia silêncio, guardando a tristeza para depois, numa vida em que o depois nunca chegava. Minhas necessidades emocionais eram como peças de roupa guardadas no fundo do armário, sempre ficando para um dia. Nunca tive tempo para sonho, para descanso, para conversa boba sem culpa. Queria apenas não faltar nada para ela. Isso se tornou lema, rotina, trincheira. Viver assim me deixou sempre na beira do buraco financeiro. Dinheiro era contado, moeda sobre moeda. Se sobrava, era milagre. Se faltava, era normal. Tornei-me dependente da Ana com o tempo, especialmente depois que ela cresceu, estudou, arranjou emprego, mudou de bairro. Passei a esperar ligações dela, pequenas ajudas quando perdiam o controle e as dívidas. Mas, secretamente, alimentava-na a esperança tola de que tudo um dia voltaria para mim em forma de gratidão, afeto, reconhecimento. Ninguém via meu esforço como ele era de verdade. Para os outros, eu era a mãe da Ana, guerreira, batalhadora. Melhor assim, pensava. Por dentro, porém, não me sentia guerreira. Sentia uma boneca quebrada, esquecida no canto do quarto, esperando alguém precisar dela de novo. Ana sempre me tratou com respeito, mas era um respeito automático, protocolar. Sinto que para ela minha presença virou um item dispensável na lista das obrigações. 2 flashes da memória me cutucam nesses dias. Num deles, volto naquele Natal em que, de última hora, vendi meu anel de noivado para comprar o vestido que Ana tanto queria para a apresentação da escola. Ela sorriu tanto naquele palco, e aquela imagem ficou amarrada na minha cabeça, como se qualquer sorriso dela valesse o preço de todo o sacrifício. O outro flash acontece no silêncio da noite, quando lembro da minha mãe dizendo, lá atrás: "Filha, cuidado para não se perder dando tudo de si. No fim, ninguém devolve o que você deu, só sente falta." Eu tinha só 18 anos naquele dia. Não entendi, mas hoje essas palavras mordem devagar. Minha casa sempre foi pequena, apertada, com móveis antigos, cheiro de produto de limpeza barato e café requentado. Nos cantos, molduras de fotos antigas dividem espaço com lembranças de onde paramos no tempo. O sofá, com seus rasgos escondidos por mantas coloridas, é meu refúgio. Ali, deito ao fim do dia, olhando o teto que descasca aos poucos, marcada pelo tempo e pelo esquecimento, igual a mim. É daqui, do centro apertado deste mundo cheio de abnegação, que espero, sem saber, o próximo pedido de Ana. Meu peito entre a esperança muda pelo reconhecimento e o medo silencioso de nunca ser vista. The hall was filled with people, the low hum of voices, mixing with bursts of laughter and clinking glasses. Everything seemed brighter in this light. The silverware gleamed, napkins folded like little swans, and the aroma of roasted meats floated under the sharp tang of cleaning spray. I'd spent all morning bustling through the kitchen, hands deep in soapy water, making sure nothing would be out of place for Felipe's big night. My son's 30th birthday. I watched as my ex-husband, Paulo, toasted loudly, commanding everyone's attention with that booming voice he never lost even after our divorce. I stood behind the buffet table, face flushed from moving between dishes and grabbing forgotten sauces. Whenever I caught Felipe's eye, he looked straight through me, grinning at friends in crisp shirts and women with shiny hair. My dress clung to my skin, damp at the armpits, and my feet hurt from hours on tile. But I smiled at anyone who bothered to ask for an extra fork or napkin. A neighbor bumped into me by the drinks. "Sandra, can I get more ice?" she said, not looking up from her phone. I nodded, turning quickly so she wouldn't see the heat in my eyes. Behind the freezer door, I closed my eyes and breathed in the cold. Even here, tucked away in the corner, I could hear laughter spilling over from the living room. The air was heavy with perfume and the sweat of so many bodies. Under it all, I could still catch the lemony soap I used to scrub the floor, a smell that clung to my hands. At some point, I heard Paulo's voice, too loud. "If it weren't por sua mãe, Felipe, nada disso aconteceria, mas ela sabe organizar, né?" Everyone laughed, not really listening, even him. He kept talking, toasted to himself, surrounded by people who never noticed the tired woman carrying plates and clearing empty cups. Felipe asked someone else to take a family photo. "Mom, can you take it for us?" The phone was thrust into my hands. All of them, Paulo, Felipe, his new girlfriend, their circle, pressed together, big smiles, arms around each other. I framed them, my hands shaking just enough for the picture to blur. It made me invisible and useful at the same time. After the flash, someone said, "Thanks, Sandra," not even looking my way as they scrolled the photos. Near the end, I reached for another plate of snacks when a group of Felipe's friends moved closer, crowding me toward the wall. I waited, tired, hoping someone would notice. One of them, Mariana, flicked her hair and said, "You must be exhausted, Donna Sandra. Bet you live for these parties, right?" They all laughed softly, glancing up just long enough to make me feel both silly and old. Felipe passed by, grabbing drinks with one hand, pulling his girlfriend close with the other. "Mom, can you get us more coccinhas? These are getting cold." I was still trying to clear away glasses, a balancing act that was beyond me now. My stomach churned. I could almost feel my blood in my face, heavy and hot. I watched the party go on, Paulo and Felipe in the center, laughing, making plans for some trip. A small cheer rose as Felipe cut the cake. I stayed in the kitchen, serving slices onto plates and hoping my fingers wouldn't shake in front of his girlfriend, who didn't even bother to thank me. My own heart beat louder than the music. When Mariana asked again if I was still standing after all this, I felt something brittle in me snap, but still smiled, nodded, kept slicing cake. In the corner, my younger niece caught my eye. She mouthed, "Quer ajuda?" I shook my head. The small burst of sympathy wrung me out instead of offering comfort. I rubbed my hands on a dish towel, glancing at the clock. The sounds grew sharper. The scrape of a chair on tile, the pop of a champagne cork. I realized I was shaking, cold even though my face was flushed. Someone spilled drink on the floor. "Sandra, limpa pra gente?" came the call, careless and casual, as though I wasn't much more than paid help. I bent down, knees aching, scrubbing stickiness into a napkin. My hearing narrowed in on the giggles behind me. "She's always so willing," someone whispered. "She'd do anything for her precious son." Even now, Paulo waved his glass for a refill, not making eye contact. Felipe didn't even notice me cleaning at his feet. I stood, fighting the urge to brush tears away, feeling my arms tingle with heat and resentment. The last straw was Mariana again, standing at the sink as I washed cake crumbs from plates. She said, "You should rest, Sandra. No one expects you to do everything." "Well, maybe just a little." She smiled, but not with her eyes. I looked around one last time, the birthday banners drooping, the plates piled up, the yellow kitchen light too harsh on tired faces. Even in this crowd, I'd never felt more alone or more certain that something in me was about to break. As I walked home that night, the world outside seemed unchanged, but inside me, something had split wide open. The wind, cool and steady, pressed against my skin, carrying bits of city dust and the stale memory of perfume from the party. My feet moved automatically, as if my body still followed the path of habit, but every step pulled at something raw and tender. I hugged my coat tighter around me, more shield than comfort. I kept seeing flashes from earlier, like a film stuck looping the worst parts. My daughter turning away as if I were invisible, her friends' laughter ringing out as I stood awkwardly behind the kitchen counter, the dirty dishes stacking up in front of me, as if that was all I was for. I felt their glances, the kind you barely notice, except they poke sharp as needles. My body remembered them too, the way my hands had trembled, how my stomach tightened into a knot so hard it hurt. Each light I passed on the street buzzed overhead. My mind raced with questions. None of them new. Is this all I am? Who would I be if I stopped? I remembered my mother's voice telling me, "We survive for others. That's the way things are." And for most of my life I had believed it. Except now everything inside me was screaming no. I thought about the way I'd handled things over the years, how I'd numbed myself, how I erased my own wishes, and grew used to being small. I remembered turning down the job offer from the clinic when my husband got sick, working nights at the market instead. I remembered quietly packing away my books and giving up my English course after my daughter was born early and needed me home. I remembered, too, how I'd once stood in a sunlit room, barely 25, with a diploma in my hand and a laugh bubbling in my throat before it all faded. But tonight was different. When I let myself into the apartment, the smell of old coffee and damp towels greeted me, familiar and faintly depressing. But I noticed for the first time in ages how small and empty the place actually felt. My keys clattered too loudly in the dish. The silence afterward was deafening. I set my things down and sat at the kitchen table, hands pressed flat against the fake wood, breathing in the quiet. An envelope, battered and yellowing at the edges, poked out from beneath a stack of unpaid bills. My nursing degree. I stared at it like it was some ancient relic. It symbolized all I'd given up and all I'd let myself become. I ran my hands over the surface, feeling the raised lettering underneath the dust. I forced myself to look at my reflection in the dark window across the room. For the first time, I let the truth in. I'd been giving everything away, but no one, absolutely no one, was giving back. I realized that what burned the most wasn't even the humiliation itself, but the pattern of always stepping back, always expecting so little. Alone in the kitchen, a clarity hit me hard. Painful, yes, but cleansing. I saw, with a sharpness almost physical, all the small moments I had swallowed. When my husband said, "You're just tired," brushing off my exhaustion. When my daughter snapped, "You don't get it. You never did." Suddenly, these weren't just irritations or misunderstandings. They were years of my life draining away. A voice, my own but more honest than usual, rang out inside my head. "Enough! I deserve more than this. I deserve to be seen." My breathing picked up, fierce and shallow. My skin prickled. The kitchen seemed too tight around me, but I welcomed the discomfort. It meant I was awake. It meant I could change. I stood abruptly, grabbed the envelope, and placed it right in the center of the table, making sure it would be the first thing anyone saw in the morning. I wanted them to ask, "What's this?" I wanted it not to be hidden anymore. I almost faltered. I imagined my daughter's scornful look, my husband's indifference, but underneath the old fear, something new began. A sense of determination built from long-ignored anger, and something close to hope. I could act now, even in small ways. I could start tonight. After that, I didn't rush into chores or hide myself away. I took a glass of water, moved to the window, and let the night air hit my face. From the street below, I could hear the distant rumble of a bus and the hum of a vending machine. Life kept going out there. But here, in this little apartment, something new was starting. Quiet, unremarkable on the surface, but revolutionary to me. I stood at the window until the city lights blurred and steadied. I remembered that day when I'd sat on the hospital steps, after my mother's funeral, clutching a letter of recommendation I never used. I remembered thinking then that love was sacrifice, that silence kept people together. Tonight I saw the lie in that memory, knew that my silence had built a cage instead. I didn't have a plan yet, but I made a decision. In the morning I would call the clinic. I would dust off my degree, even if no one believed in me. I would not ask for permission. Not this time. As the night thickened, wrapping the city in dark velvet, I let myself rest, not out of exhaustion, but as a promise to myself that things would shift. I breathed deeply, my body aching and alive. I pictured myself moving through the coming days braver, bolder, refusing to recoil. I realized I was afraid, yes, but more than that, I was done waiting to be rescued. The kitchen was silent. The envelope sat on the table, and inside me, a steel thread of resolve took its first trembling hold. I wasn't invisible anymore, even if only to myself, even if only tonight. When I wake the next day, the light in my room seems different, paler and cooler, barely slipping through the thin curtains. I sit up slowly, listening, expecting to hear voices, the thud of footsteps, the echo of demands. But the house is utterly, unmistakably silent. I move carefully out of bed, feeling every muscle, every bone that's carried years of other people's burdens. Even the floor beneath my feet feels foreign, like I'm walking through someone else's home. I go to the kitchen and stand in front of the fridge, staring at the clutter of notes, phone numbers, and appointment cards, reminders of everything I was expected to remember. My hand hovers over the magnet with the faded photo of my daughter at 10, her grin wide and free. Before I pull it off, I work methodically, removing every last sticky note and faded scrap of paper. With each one gone, I feel lighter. I wipe the fridge door until it shines, the first gleaming patch I've seen in years. It feels as if I'm clearing space in my mind as much as in my kitchen. Still in my pajamas, I step into the utility room, where I'd piled laundry, mountains of shirts smelling faintly of cologne and distant perfume, towels with bleach stains, socks without pairs. I sort only my own things into a basket. The rest I leave where they are. A soft rebellion. Upstairs, I find my husband's bills and papers scattered across my desk. I stack them up and, without a word, place them on his side of the bed. I spread out my own notebook and pen, a tiny corner that is mine alone. I feel calmer than I thought possible. Instead of screaming or slamming doors, my movements are deliberate, almost gentle. I brew a fresh cup of coffee and sit at the small table with a view of the yard. For the first time in ages, I open my journal and let myself write. At first, the words hesitate, broken lines and awkward phrases, but I keep going. I write down the pieces of myself I've ignored, my longing to travel, my love for thunderstorms, the way I used to sing while driving, all things I had packed away for obligations and chores. I jot down 3 things I want for myself in the next month. One of them is rest. Just that, rest. At noon, I take the suitcase I'd packed the night before, wheel it down the stairs and set it by the door. The handle is worn and the bag isn't full, but it feels like a flag. Declaration, warning, promise. My heart hammers against my ribs, but the air in my lungs comes easier, as if I've shed some invisible weight. I fix myself a quick lunch, a simple sandwich, no one else's preferences to consider, and eat it slowly, savoring the quiet. Every bite seems to fill the hollow space in my chest where anxiety usually sits. Once the dishes are rinsed, I walk through the living room, tracing my hand along the edge of the old upright piano, its keys sticky from neglect. I dust off the surface and pull out the bench. I sit, hesitantly, and play a gentle chord progression, one I composed when I was a girl, before life became duty after duty. The sound startles me, fragile but beautiful, curling through the empty house. My fingers tremble but don't falter. As the song grows, so does a sense of ownership. These notes are mine. This moment is mine. Later, I gather all of my personal documents, passport, birth certificate, diplomas, everything I could need and everything I once thought belonged to someone else. I put them in a separate folder and tuck it deep in the suitcase. I collect the old earrings my mother left me, a battered copy of my favorite novel, the photo of my parents by the sea. These items are small, but each is a thread tying me back to myself. It's late afternoon when I make the biggest move. I go to the joint account statement on the kitchen table and, as quietly as if I were smoothing a tablecloth, I pick it up and call the bank. My voice wavers at first, but I steady myself, asking to create a new account in my name only. No explanation, just the facts, spoken calmly. I transfer what I can, half of the emergency funds, what I brought into the marriage. The bank clerk is polite but distant, as if this is just another bit of paperwork. For me, it feels like splitting atoms. When the confirmation number comes, I write it in my notebook. I close my eyes and feel a balloon of relief rise through my chest. I am no longer completely tied to them. By sunset, some patterns have already broken. I don't set the table for 3. I don't check the family group chat. I let the phone ring until it stops. I put on music I like. Quiet, lyrical, unwitnessed. I dance softly, barefoot on cold tiles, letting my body move the way it wants. At first, I feel ridiculous, but soon the awkwardness fades, and what remains is pure, undiluted presence. There are moments of fear, anxiety scraping its claws along my resolve. Once, I nearly pick up the phone to call my daughter and apologize preemptively, as if for a crime I haven't committed. But I set it down, hands shaking. I tell myself, out loud, this is my right. This is enough for now. I breathe steadily, holding on to this new sense of self like it's a precious thing, cradling it carefully so it won't disappear. No one comes home that evening, but I don't fill the silence with busy work. I sit in the backyard as dusk deepens, mug warm between my hands, watching the light shift through the trees. The air smells of cut grass and freedom, sharp and clean. For the briefest moment, I am not afraid. When I go back inside, I pass the clean fridge, the suitcase by the door, the clear surface of my desk, the piano in the corner, each a quiet assertion, a signpost marking this territory as my own. It's not much, maybe, barely a ripple in the household routines, but I know something fundamental has shifted. The ache in my chest is softer now, ebbed by the knowledge that something in me refused to die. This was not an angry explosion, nor a desperate bid for escape. It was something slower, deeper, the steady, stubborn reclamation of space. Tonight I sleep with the window slightly open. The night air moves gently across my face, and for the first time in decades, I dream of nothing but myself, my hopes, my voice, my future. And in the quiet dark, I know the first real victory has already happened, no matter what comes next. The days after my small rebellion felt thick and muffled, as if I were walking underwater, heart pounding with both fear and something new. Hope, perhaps, though I hardly dared to believe it. Quiet mornings filled with silence replaced the old routine of being beckoned and ordered before the sun even rose. Instead of rushing, I moved slowly. But that space, that quiet, it left room for other noises. Rings, knocks, messages blinking on my phone, voices raised behind closed doors I was no longer willing to enter. At first, no one seemed to believe I could really mean it. My daughter, Paula, tried to sweep into my apartment as if nothing had shifted. She rattled the doorknob when I didn't answer immediately, her voice thin with annoyance. "Mother, can you open? I need to talk to you about Raphael's ride to school tomorrow. You shouldn't lock yourself in." I sat at the edge of my bed, hands trembling, watching the doorknob twist. When she finally left, footsteps fading, I exhaled a shaky breath. My phone pinged with messages, some from Paula, others from my sister. Most were long, heavy with guilt. "We know you're tired, but you can't just abandon us." But a few were clipped and cold. "Selfish. Never thought you'd turn as bitter as Tia Marisa." My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I never replied. One morning, my ex-husband Jorge called 5 times before noon. I didn't answer. His voice filled the voicemail anyway. "Sandra, are you all right? The kids are worried. I don't understand what you think you're doing. After all we've been through, you throw it away? You're acting unstable. Call me. Now." His last words were a command. I felt the old reflex to obey, but I pressed delete. A neighbor, Donna Ruth, tried to mediate. She caught me by the elevator. Her voice sirupe. "Menina, a família está aflita, sabia? O que você anda arrumando? Não faça isso com eles. Agora que estão todos precisando de você mais do que nunca." I smiled thinly, not answering. For the first time, I saw her not as a kindly old friend, but as another voice, keeping me small, isolated, with no voice echoed back to me. My apartment became unsettlingly quiet. My mind replayed old doubts. E se eles estiverem certos? E se eu for realmente ingrata? I'd call myself names. Try to rationalize stepping back into their schedules, their needs, that old harness of expectation. My heart ached with missing Paula's children's laughter, the embrace of family holidays, the comfort of having a role, any role, among them. Yet every time I hovered on the verge of breaking, picking up the phone, walking down the hallway, I remembered the liberation in saying no. I remembered my muscles unclenching as I walked out of their house with my own house key swinging in my fingers. I would glance at my potted orchid on the kitchen table, alive with a single stubborn flower, and remind myself that isolation was not the same as loneliness. Not anymore. Attempts to drag me back came in waves. Paula showed up again a week later, clutching Raphael by the wrist. He looked at me with wide, confused eyes. Vovó, mamãe disse você tá doente. Você tá triste comigo? My heart twisted, but I bent down, met his eyes, and smiled gently. No, meu amor. I'm not sick, only changing. Paula's face hardened. Just tell me when you'll come get him next week. He's confused. This is cruel. I shook my head. Not this time, Paula. I need time for myself now. Raphael pressed into Paula's side, seeking comfort she couldn't give. Another day, I found Jorge standing in the lobby, arms crossed, anger radiating from him. Sandra, you owe your family more than this. You can't just abandon your duties. I let him speak, and then walked past him without answering, noticing for the first time how small his anger seemed, compared to my own growing certainty. My silence was my answer. Donna Ruth, persistent as ever, called up from the sidewalk, waving a plastic grocery bag, voice raised for all the neighbors to hear. Sandra, eu trouxe pão. Você não vai descer? Não seja orgulhosa, mulher. I almost laughed. Obrigada, Ruth, mas hoje não. Eu preciso de silêncio. I watched her deflate through the curtain, surprised at my own resilience. The messages on my phone shifted from indignant to pleading to manipulative. Paula's last voice message lingered most. If you don't help, I'll just have to figure out things on my own. But don't come back when it's too late, okay? After listening, I put the phone in a drawer and decided it would stay there for the night. Loneliness visited at odd hours, whispering that maybe I'd made a mistake. But I stood in my newly organized kitchen, ran my hand along the edge of the clean counter, and breathed deeply. This silence, this space, though sometimes heavy, was mine. I started to set boundaries in small ways. When Paula asked for money, I explained softly, I need to take care of my own bills now. When Jorge tried again to enlist me for errands, I was firm. I'm unavailable this week. It felt strange at first. Guilt wrestled with relief, each act like a stone in a new foundation, uncertain and yet solid in my hands. One afternoon, Lucia, the only one who ever listened, once my confidant, called. She sounded hesitant, different. Sandra, you don't seem well. I talked to Paula. Maybe you're just confused. Talk to me before you do anything else rash. Her voice stung. You too, Lucia? I asked. Her silence on the other end said it all. For a while I grieved the loss of that friendship, but as days crept by, my resolve outlasted their tactics, guilt trips, and even my own doubts. I built new habits. Coffee on the balcony at dawn, brisk walks around the block, afternoons at the library, reading books with no one to interrupt me. I realized that I could stand the emptiness, and in time, maybe even grow to enjoy it. The noise of others faded enough that I heard something new. Under all that silence, my own steady breath, a heart beating, and finally, the quiet voice inside whispering, Keep going. This is your life now. Don't go back. The house felt heavier that afternoon, the late sun falling through the lace curtain in harsh angles on surfaces that hadn't been dusted in weeks. I moved with a slowness I'd learned these last days, cautious, almost rehearsed, each passo shuffling, each mo hesitating, like the world was made de vidro, and I'd finally realized how often I'd been walking on shards. I started cleaning, from an old habit, but my olos kept drifting to the hallway, to the gaveta where I'd stuffed everything I didn't want to think about. Folders, receipts, envelopes, things I'd filed away in the background while resolvendo crises, dos outros. There was a stack of old bills and yellowed cards, a faded envelope with a handwriting I recognized immediately. Jorge, my late husband's name. still curling at the edge. I almost put it back, breath catching, but then something made me open it. The paper was thin, almost translucent, the ink a rushed blue. I read the note twice. It was a letter addressed not to me, but to Saida, a name I hadn't dared pronounce in years. She'd been my friend, years atrás. The memory hit hard, us laughing about nothing, our kids running in the park, her secrets whispered between chores. The letter was dated only months before Jorge died. Phrases like, "Não posso viver sem você," and "Ela nunca saberá." I felt my estomago hollow with each line. My mind reeled. All those nights he'd come home late, the missed anniversarios, my questions brushed off. I'd chosen every single time to believe it was just work, exhaustion, life. Rage rose slow and thick, like honey left too long in the sun. Sadness, too, for all as coisas que ignoré. I stumbled to the bathroom, sat on the Freya Sanita, and remembered distinctly the afternoon Saida stopped returning my calls, the way Jorge had hugged me, oddly tight, the morning he was gone for hours after our son's soccer final. Back then, I told myself it didn't matter. There's nothing worse than Serra Ultima, a saber. I pressed the thin paper flat on my skirts and breathed deep. For the first time in anos, I didn't feel an urge to cry, just a kind of seeing. Como se meus olhos finalmente tivessem desembaçado. I sat alone for long minutes, clutching the letter as if it could explain something that needed no explanation. It wasn't just about Jorge or Cida, or even betrayal. It was about quanto tempo passei virada pra dentro, tapando o buraco dos outros, alheia à própria história que se escrevia pelas minhas costas. I remembered a Christmas, years atrás, when I'd come across Jorge and Cida talking softly in the car, parked right outside the house. I'd brushed it aside then. Eles só estavam conversando. Now the scene se reconectava, parts of a puzzle I hadn't realized was mine to solve. Every year I'd felt a sticky, unspoken tension whenever our families met. Every festa I'd worked twice as hard to agradar, convinced my efforts could hold my world together. The anger didn't consume me. In a strange, almost quiet way, it liberated. You finalmente entendía. I had been living a story that only made sense to everyone but me. I had carried the weight, and in exchange, had been kept in the dark. The letter, more than a confession, was a confirmation that my sacrifices had gone unnoticed. My loyalty, an afterthought. I thought about going to my son, to show him, but stopped. This was not for explaining. It was for me. I poured myself a glass of water, the coldness sharp on my tongue. For the first time, I allowed myself the small mercy of not feeling responsible for anyone else's choices. I walked to the mirror, letter in hand. The face looking back wasn't just tired. It was marked by a kind of clearness, all those lines around my mouth and eyes, as if each told a little story of what I'd abdicated, a lifetime of waiting and forgiving, swept into the realization that I never owed anyone that much of myself. I sat in the living room, traced the edges of the letter, and let myself remember everything. Then, deliberately, I stood up. I folded the letter slowly, placed it back in its envelope, and sealed it inside a box along with pictures of Jorge and Kaida, stacked with other relics of a life I was finally allowing myself to see as pasado. I wasn't sure what I would do next, but I was sure that I wouldn't carry the shame or sadness of others anymore. The truth had set something inside me free, and although I didn't know exactly what would follow, I knew that nothing would be quite as heavy again. I slept little that night. My mind spun, restless and raw, as if I'd looked outside my own skin and seen every bruise they left on me. The room felt different, heavier, quieter. I watched the light change on the cracked white paint of my bedroom ceiling and knew today couldn't end like the others. Today would be the day I'd confront everything, every lie, every stolen hour, every humiliation with the same force that once made me sit silent. I wore the blue dress, the one Maria used to say, made me look dignified, simple, with worn-out seams at the cuff, but clean. One last attempt at respect for myself. I looked at myself in the mirror for longer than usual, tracing the lines around my mouth, remembering how my mother's always tightened before a hard conversation. Around mid-morning, I walked to their house, the one I'd paid for, cleaned, fixed, where the smell of coffee always hit me first, heavy with bitterness I'd learned to swallow since before I knew the word. The sun glared on the front steps, washing everything in a harsh, honest light. I heard laughter inside before I knocked. For a moment my heart paused, threatened to flutter out of my chest. But I knocked anyway. 3 deliberate raps that echoed more in my bones than on the wood. He opened the door. My son. He looked smaller in the bright sun, hair uncombed, face hard. His eyes slid over me, searching for softness. But he found stone. "Why are you here?" His voice was flat, practiced. "We need to talk." He stepped aside, but only a little. My ex-husband was at the kitchen table, arms folded, pretending to read the paper. I smelled bread warming in the oven, the faint bleach from last night's dishes. Something sharp and vinegary under it all. Maria was there too, fiddling with her phone, lips pressed tight. I took a breath, smelling not just the house, but all the years layered inside. I'd once scrubbed these floors, patched curtains, paid overdue bills with my own hands. That smell was my offering, and my wound. I stepped into the kitchen. My heels made steady taps on the tile. Nobody invited me to sit. My back didn't need the invitation anymore. My son spoke first, his words chopped, brittle. "Did you think we'd forget what you did? All this drama, out of nowhere." I leveled my gaze at him, at both of them. "No, I'm here so you remember." My ex-husband snorted, folding his arms tighter. "You're being ridiculous. After everything we did for you, you walk away and act like a martyr." I felt anger twist, but I held it. My voice was quiet, anchored. "Everything you did for me, or everything I did for you?" He looked away, jaw clenched. Maria barely raised her eyes from her phone. "I gave you my years, all my energy, my money, my sleep, my hopes. I covered your mistakes. I let myself be punched by your silence and by your words." He shook his head, voice rising, desperate now. "Don't start with this victim thing. You were always dramatic. That's why we had to take over, you know. Otherwise, nothing would work." "Take over?" My laugh was sharp, pain hollowing it out. "You took over because you needed someone to blame when life felt small." My son glared, lip curled. "We just wanted peace. Now you come here wanting what, exactly? Apology? For what? You never did anything special. Is that what you believe?" My voice trembled, not from fear but from the weight these words had carried, silent inside me. "I never did anything special, besides raise you, feed you, teach you to walk away from fights because I never could, hide the bills so you didn't have to see our poverty, pat your father's pride so you could believe he was strong." Maria's hand stilled on her phone. "You like doing that. You made yourself a martyr." I looked at her, and for the first time in years I didn't feel guilt. I felt clean. "No, I was taught to do it so you wouldn't have to. I stopped today. From now on, your peace will come at your own cost." My ex-husband rose, chair scraping loud against the tile. "What are you after? Money? Name? Pity?" "Myself." My voice was low, a thread finally tied. "I want what's left of me. That's all." He laughed, sharp and ugly. "You'll regret this soon enough. You can't live without us. You'll crawl back, you always do. Not this time." I looked him in the eye, because I finally learned what it feels like to breathe and know I owe nothing to anyone but myself. He went silent. My son opened and closed his fists. Maria stared harder at the phone, but I caught the shine of a tear before she blinked it away. I moved toward the door. Their silence was thicker than ever, like dense fog slipping in. I felt them trying to pull me back with memories, with habits, with guilt. But for the first time, I could see each of those tricks. They had no grip. I looked back just once to say the words I'd saved for years. "You can tell yourselves whatever you want, but you don't get to decide my story anymore." He tried to follow, words tumbling. "You're being unfair. No one's going to take care of you when you fall." I smiled, with something lighter than I expected. "I'll be fine falling. I've spent a lifetime down. Now I'm only interested in teaching myself to fly." The handle of the front door was cool in my hand, grounding me. My pulse, usually fluttering, was strong. I stepped outside into the wide, hard light of morning, and this time, I didn't look back. As I walked home, the world felt new, its edges sharp, alive, and mine. Sunlight bathes the living room in a quiet gold. The paint on the walls still carries the gentle smell of recent change. Soft blue, chosen by me. I walk barefoot across the floor. The cold tiles, always so hard in the mornings, now remind me that I can make this space whatever I want. A small vase with wildflowers sits in the middle of the table, stems tangled. petals stubbornly alive. I chose them for their mess, not their order. I move slowly. There is no one rushing me. The house feels unfamiliar, but not lonely, just vast in a way that invites me to fill it differently. I open the windows wide, letting the city's noise and light in. Cars passing, shouts from children playing on the street, the clink of a neighbor's spoon against a glass. Life beyond these walls goes on, but for once it doesn't demand me. I can simply watch. I make coffee the old-fashioned way, boiling water in a dented kettle, pouring it carefully over the grounds, watching the steam twist upwards. The sound is comforting, the smell richer than I remember. My favorite mug is chipped on one side, but I like it that way. It fits perfectly in my hands, warm and dependable. I add a slice of buttered bread and a piece of fruit, the simplicity pleasing me. I eat by the window, noticing how the sun glimmers off the glass and makes the dust motes dance. Sometimes my mind slips back to the past, but it's less painful now. The ache is still there, old habits of worry and waiting, but it is quieter, less insistent. I focus on small rituals, watering my plants, fluffing the sofa pillows, writing in a notebook I bought just for myself. Its pages hold lists, memories, ideas for tomorrow. When fear tries to settle back in my chest, I breathe deeper and remember last night's sleep. Long, dreamless, healing. My phone buzzes. A message from Marina, my neighbor-turned-friend, whose presence feels like fresh air. "Want some company for a walk?" she asks. I pause, smile, and answer, "Yes, let's go." We stroll under the fig trees, our steps unhurried, sharing stories with more laughter than sorrow now. She tells me how my eyes seem brighter. I realize she's right, though I hadn't noticed. Our conversation is light, no longer circling around pain. We talk about the next movie to see, the corner cafe's chocolate cake, the strayed dog that sometimes follows her home. When I return, the street is glowing with the last light of day. Inside, my home is warm. The air carries the scent of baking bread from someone's kitchen nearby. I draw a bath and let the water run over my feet, watching the ripples, feeling how soft and alive I am. I light a small candle just for me, the flame wobbling but steady. In this flicker I see not just survival, but something like hope. Before bed, I sit at my desk and write one line for tomorrow. Try something new. Maybe the painting class, maybe only a walk in a new direction. Close the notebook with gentle hands, heart certain in its quiet beat. I see my reflection in the hallway mirror, my hair loose, smile small but growing. The lines around my eyes are softer tonight. I reach out and touch the glass, not to search for approval, but to promise myself, this life will not return to old shapes. I am not what I gave, nor what was taken. The future is wide and trembling, and mine. Tomorrow the sun will rise in these open rooms. I am ready for it. From now on, I only walk forwards,